This isn't going to be one of those like paint by numbers tips episode. This is an episode from a real world, real marriage, real mood swing perspective, because it ain't always sweet. Expenses change, things happen. Welcome to the Rich and Regular podcast, where we explore life at the intersection of money. I'm Kirsten.
And I'm Julian. And today we're talking about what it takes to live on one income. We're going to talk about that in depth, offer up some tips. But first, I want to give a shout out to B Wood 83. That sounds like a R&B singer. B Wood on the beat, who left us a 5-star review entitled Great Information. The podcast constantly covers great topics that help to improve your finances and also really makes you think.
Oh,
I appreciate that. I want to add a little extra shout out to everyone that has supported our mini doc, our short film. We wanted to call it an op doc, but I think Kirsten learned that was it's trademark term, which happened to be one of the conversations I had in my DM. Someone was asking whether or not they could use Rich and Regular. I was like, I mean, you can, but we own that trademark. And so if you try to make some money off of that, we might end up in a problem downstream. But I want to give a shout out to everyone really that has supported Taste the Impact. It was a really great project that we worked with. Special shout out to Invest for Better, Rihanna Lynn, everyone that has supported it, the entire production team that we worked with in the past for helping that project come to life. And for everyone that has watched it, left a review. Even if you meant to watch it, do us a favor, go ahead, watch it, press play, just leave it on in the background.
That's it.
Like that. Honestly, you could do that and then actually watch it a little later. If you do that, we would greatly appreciate it. One income. Let's talk about this. I think it's kind of obvious, but I don't want to make that assumption because these are the times that we're in. And I forgot exactly how we phrased it before. It was something to the effect of desperate times, calling for desperate measures, but us being a little bit unsure about like the desperate measure part. It's like we just want to keep on talking about how tough things are, but a lot of times we are finding ourselves being unwilling to do that. I'm not going to go down a long list of data and stats, even though there are plenty to choose from that highlight exactly what we're talking about. But what I will say is, as someone that has stepped into public servant life quite a bit over the last year and a half, whether it's my involvement in the PTA or Little League or just like little things here and there, if there's one consistent thing that I've seen, it's that working parents are completely stressed out. We don't have it to give, and it is impacting the social fabric, at least in our community. And I know it's everywhere, but I know for a fact because I've seen it and witnessed it up close. And the reason for that, this is where the part of like everything is connected starts to come back in, is because the reality is a lot of us are really, really stressed out. If you are employed, you are nervous because your company is either talking about layoffs or has already done it and you don't know. Maybe you were impacted by layoffs. And this is at all levels, lower level employees, higher level employees. Finding a job, I think, is just so incredibly difficult. And what is happening is a lot of us are bouncing out of what used to be or feel like a really predictable way of life into something that is all of a sudden very suddenly unpredictable and feels unsafe and unsure. Yes. And
it messes with your nervous system.
A lot of us are ill-equipped to deal with that. And so that's why we want to talk about it, because wherever you are in your journey to financial independence or whatever your wealth building goals are, if you have gone through the experience of living off of one income, moments like this kind of feel like, all right, so we're right back to where we were in this moment where we were doing that willingly. When you make that decision to do it willingly, it prepares you for moments like this. When you're not prepared for it and you're forced to do it, now you've created a lifestyle that relies on two incomes and you're forced to live off of one, and in some cases even less than one. And that's where the stress comes in. That's right. Where all the problems come in. That's where not just the things within your family start to break down emotionally, even just like efficiently and structurally, but broader effects on your family, your community start to break down. And I think a lot of people are dealing with that right now. And that's one of the reasons, obviously the primary reason why we wanted to talk about it, because there's a lot to this period. And I think a lot of folks need some help.
Yeah, I think whenever people talk about living on one income, they focus on cutting expenses.
Yeah.
And they don't focus on the questions that it forces, like who's allowed to spend,
correct,
who's working harder, What do each of us deserve?
Yeah.
Is this temporary? Is it permanent? And when one person is sacrificing more, how do you make sure that both people still feel seen? And this episode is about those moments.
Yeah.
It's not about the stuff that shows up in the spreadsheet. It's about the stuff that decides whether or not your plan to live off of one income actually works.
The people part.
Yeah, the people part. That's the hard part.
That's the hard part with everything.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like
yes.
The skill itself, whatever it is that you do for a reason or for a living, rather, at your job is not the hard part. It's the people. It is always going to be the people part. It is, no matter how many times you think you've said it, or no matter how many times you think you've told yourself something, it's actually dealing with the emotions. And this is true whether you're dealing with trying to transition from a dual income or multi-income to one, or even in reverse. It's the people part. In the good times, we said we were going to do this, but now we're not. We blew it, and now we're right back where we were, even though we made more money. It's the people part, and that's really what we want to focus on in this episode.
Now, we've lived off of one income in a couple of different ways. Some of them were intentional, some of them were survival mode, and some of them were just vibes, just like personal choice. Like you said, before you quit your job, we actually acted like we lived off of one income. And that mindset is what allowed us to pay off all of the debt and stack real savings and invest at a really high rate. It was never really about deprivation. It was about building that discipline as a couple. But then in 2018, you quit for real. And that was when we were living off of my income alone. Like that was just what we decided to do. And you'd think we were ready for it because we had been practicing, but living it is totally different from like practicing. Like actually only having one income and choosing to abide by that is totally different from what we were doing before.
Yep.
And then by 2020, I had stepped away too. And so since then, we've been living off this mix of business income and investment income, which is basically still one income. It's not like two paychecks. We each kind of put things together. And so I just feel like this isn't going to be one of those, I don't know, like paint by numbers tips episode. This is an episode from a real world, real marriage, real mood swing perspective, because shit ain't always sweet. Like sometimes there is that conflict, regardless of how long you've been together or how long you've been sharing a checking account. Expenses change, things happen.
Yeah. And I also think it's a bit of a natural progression. I think when you are first starting out, let's say you're in a relationship with someone, there's obviously going to be the just getting to know them and learn their habits, the way that they were raised, and what baggage, whether it's good or bad, that they're bringing into the relationship. And that has an effect on the way that you all are having conversations about money. We go into great detail about that first conversation in our book, and we've spoken about it in the past. We're not going to rehash that. But I want to just make sure that I'm emphasizing that, because what happens normally, especially when people reach out and ask us for advice, is that they feel like something has changed. And it's like, well, yeah, like life changed. Lots of things change, like your job prospects change, your level of confidence on your career path, your health changes. Maybe you've had a child, like lots of things changed. And I think there's this tendency for people to feel like, well, we said this, and I'm just going to go ahead and say it. It's mostly men from what I've seen.
Hello.
You said this, and now all of a sudden you want to switch it up and you want to change it. It was like, yeah, I feel differently now than I did.
And the circumstances are different. Ago. Exactly.
Yeah. And so, it's an interesting thing. And so while budgeting is important, there is more to budgeting than just looking at the numbers and swearing by the numbers and letting the numbers dictate your decision-making wholly, right? Like it's not that simple. Life is not that simple. The numbers are an indication of what's happening. How you interpret those numbers is a completely different thing. And this is where negotiation comes into play. Like you have to negotiate. Even if you decide, like if you and your partner decide that now is the time to cut back, the question becomes, well, who's cutting back? How much of the cutback is something that we're doing? How much of it should just be something that you should be doing because maybe you have a greater percentage of the discretionary spend or the other person doesn't have it? Or maybe there is a recognition that there is a long-term goal that you're not really willing to sacrifice, but there may be something more so in the short or midterm that you're willing to cut back on. And so for that reason, that negotiation, which obviously requires us to have transparent and honest conversations, you have to make sure that you all are being honest about how you feel, first of all. And that may seem obvious, but you have to make sure that you're being honest. You can't always put the other person's feelings ahead of yours or ahead of the truth or your interpretation of the truth. But you also have to make sure that you're being real about how whatever decision is being made is making you feel, because that's also a way of kind of communicating that we are making a certain decision. And I'm just saying, this is how I think, if this continues, like, this is likely not going to go well. That way, when that happens, or if it doesn't happen, you have a bit of a record, right? Like you said something, and it's not a matter of like saying, I got you. I told you I was going to be mad if we stopped going out, or if, I told you I wasn't going to be happy if you had a hotel on a vacation and it wasn't the hotel that you wanted. I'm not saying that. I'm saying having honest conversations about the budget. We would always call it like adding a bit of qualitative data to the budget, right? So there's the spreadsheet in and of itself, but below that are some comments. Wow, we're making the decision to not go to, I'm just making it up, a friend's wedding in Texas, or we're making the decision to skip out. Only one of us is going to go, right? Write that down. That way you have something to draw on. It's almost like a supplemental journal entry.
Yeah.
Right? Because you really want to make sure that if you get 2 years from now and you are satisfied with that decision, you're like, you know what? I stand by that. And I put that on the list of, accolades of really good, tough decision making that we made together. If you regret it, now you can draw on that the next time and say, you know what? Looking back, we probably should have let these things go, and we should likely double down on these kinds of experiences. Wow. Because I'll just be honest, I don't particularly enjoy going to weddings anymore. I'm a little older. I just don't really enjoy them. But I believe and understand that might change in the future, because I may say, you know what, weddings are actually a really good time for us to have a little fun and stay a little longer and turn that into a little mini getaway. So all of that to say, it's not just about the numbers. If you're the numbers person, probably mad right now because you maybe feel like I'm poo-pooing on your planning, but it's not just about the numbers. And the same is true in business as well, right? The numbers matter, but it's not everything. How you feel, especially if you're in a partnership, is just as important as whatever the numbers are saying at the end of the day.
Yeah. And this is why the tip is you can't just budget. You have to negotiate. And I know that negotiation can feel like a cold word, but the truth is every couple is negotiating everything all the time, whether they realize it or not. At the end of the day, you're on the same team. And the goal of a negotiation is to figure out, how do we stay on the same team, even if our needs are pulling us in very different directions? And one of the challenges with calling it negotiation is that most negotiation advice is rooted in winning. You're usually talking about two people sitting on opposite ends of a table on different sides of an equation or a game. And in this case, in a relationship, winning can be losing because the deal doesn't end just because the budget squares up and is balanced. You still have to live with this person. You still got to share a bed. You still got to share the stress. And so you can't think of this as like winning, or I let you have, or you let me have, or I did this or whatever. It's really a question about staying on the same team and focusing on the shared problem, which is deciding what is the consequence if we can't agree. That shifts from fighting each other to remembering that this is a shared problem. We don't need to delay the conversation for so many weeks waiting for more income or less stress. We don't need to find the right moment to talk about it. Naming that shared cost of delaying a decision kind of helps you take action sooner. It reminds you that you're on the same team. And that is where the momentum and the relief comes from. It's never about whatever the category is. It's never about whether or not you get to eat out or go to a wedding or whatever you're arguing about. It's about what that spending represents and how we can figure out how to achieve that a different way.
One of the other things that I think often comes out of these kinds of negotiations is you realize the imbalance of the power dynamic that's typically revealed in this moment.
Absolutely.
And it works both ways. Let's say you're the person that normally does all of the budgeting. That resentment is building up, right? Because you feel so empowered to tell the other person where the cuts need to be because you're the one that is paying attention to the numbers. And on the reverse, the other person, it's almost like it's suddenly revealed how deeply vulnerable they are.
Well, it feels like you're telling me that I can't feel certain ways.
Yeah.
Well, we said this in the book in Cashing Out, that every time you spend, you're chasing a feeling, whether that's security or spontaneity or fun or sexiness, whatever it is. And so when you start cutting, like just cutting expenses, it feels like, okay, well, now how am I supposed to feel sexy if I can't buy this lingerie? Or how am I supposed to feel pretty if I can't get my hair and nails done?
Yeah.
Or how am I supposed to feel secure if I can't do X, Y, and Z? And that's where the conversation has to come in.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. So negotiate. That's tip number one. Tip number two, I'm just going to be real. This is one of my favorite ones. You just have to get comfortable saying no. It's like a really, really strong word. You don't have to say it like a bark or a roar, but you can definitely, I've been watching Mufasa. I'm not gonna lie. I've been watching a lot of Mufasa. It's on Disney Plus. It's pretty good, actually. I'm gonna finish it later today. But that's where the roar part come in. But no, like you have to get comfortable saying no. And I don't just mean saying it to your partner. It's saying it to yourself more often than not. Because you're gonna say no a lot going through this process. My bad, bro. I'm not gonna be able to make it. Sorry, I got invited to a party just the other day. Got invited again.
Yeah.
Yesterday, same party, they doing it again. I was like, yeah, that's our way around. I'm not gonna be able to do that, bro. I'm sorry. But I'll see you on Monday. When you're being forced to live on one income, the world does not always know that. You know what I mean? Your friends don't know that. So they just know that, man, if they're asking you for money, I'm asking you because I think you got it. You know what I mean? You have to get comfortable saying no. There was who was it? This is how you know. Again, another indicator of the pressure that people are feeling. You got preachers, and I was going to go ahead and call it out. What's that guy's name? The one that's been popping off? It was SAP or something like that?
I don't know.
Well, basically, there was something going viral on social media about a preacher who said he was locking the doors until we got like $40,000 or something like that. It was a black preacher. And obviously people were up in arms about it. It felt like a shakedown. But again, this is one of those things where it's an indicator to me of where we are and just like how tight things are feeling. And that tension is starting to create a ripple effect, even in the church. And so whether it's your partner, whether you're saying it to yourself, you have to get comfortable saying no to the dinners, the subscriptions, the girls trip, the little upgrades that you normally have grown accustomed to. I mean, you have to get comfortable doing that, and you have to get comfortable dealing with and churning through the guilt that comes with that feeling, because you will naturally feel like, man, I'm not able to do this. You feel guilty about a decision that you made in the past. At the end of the day, I promise you, like most of those no's, you're going to completely forget about. It's not a big deal. A handful of them you will, and that's okay. You learn from them and you move on. But the other positive side is that this is where you start to truly understand the value of your community. And this is when, if you have already built one, your community starts to kind of strengthen. Because this is where
sometimes you have some friends that are down with low budget hangs, and there are other friends that make you feel like you're letting them down.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, this is where your new community, for whatever your season that you're in, starts to actually shine. You realize that actually I don't have to trade off much. Or maybe just this period is different and I can't hang with my friends that I normally go to Bali and Vegas with, or Dubai. Now this might be the reason to start exploring middle America and coastal, what is it? The Gulf of America now.
I'm going to speak from the person who had the income and then had to like eliminate it and say, you like a no. I don't like no's. I've gotten more comfortable with them. But it feels like every no that you say chips away at this sense of normalcy that you used to have, unless you learn how to reframe it, which is what you're talking about. Like, look on the bright side. But before you do that, like there is a trough of like regret and guilt, especially again, if you were the person who kept the income, telling your kid no for something that feels or used to feel small and reasonable is like, oh, it's heartbreaking. Or that feeling where you feel like you're missing your own milestones. It's not even about somebody else's wedding. It's about your birthday or your anniversary or something that's important to you. That's just a different kind of heartbreak that you have to be prepared for. And there are ways to prep yourself, or at least create a foundation for being able to say no more easily. Because you're right. You're going to have to say it a lot. You're going to have to say it a lot.
Yeah.
And when you are raw or emotionally caught off guard, it's hard to make really thoughtful decisions. So having a pre-negotiated or predetermined script ahead of time helps. Like one of the things that we did was decide ahead of time what was off the table. We looked at the calendar. We knew that some people were having 40th birthday parties in Vegas, or we knew that there was a wedding that was across the country that would cost us $4,000 to attend. Those are the things that we talked about in advance and decided, are you going to go? Are we both going to go? Are we going to make this our thing? And we had those pre-negotiated scripts, so we didn't have to think when the moment came up. We didn't have to decide at the time when the invitation comes in. It's like, well, we already said we weren't saying yes to anything that was more than $1,500, whatever it is. And this can happen in small ways and in big ways. You can decide that, for the next 3 months, you're not going to do any more subscriptions or tech upgrades. And if anybody feels strongly about something in that period, then we can talk about it then. You can say things like, to your friends, you can say things like, we are in a big no spend period. And so we can still hang out, but we can't go out. Like I can't pay $21 every time I want to drink. You can come by the house and you can theme it up, whatever it is. But decide in advance what you're going to say no to, including your children, so that when it comes up, because it will, you never know how long these periods are going to be, especially if you're not choosing to be a one income household.
Yeah.
Decide in advance so that when it comes up, you already have your answer.
So let me punch back a little bit or defend those who are a bit more comfortable using no. Here's the thing. I'm not saying it absolutely. I'm not saying, like I said, you will regret some things, right? But the majority of the things, in my experience, you end up not regretting.
Oh, I agree. But it takes a while.
And I will also say a couple of the no's that you do regret, even within them, there's a percentage of them, and dare I say 30% of them, you end up, if you dig deep enough, you end up realizing that the person that really wanted you to say yes just is like overwhelmingly unwilling to deal with using no as well. And they just don't know how. Mm-hmm. And it creates an opportunity for them to say, oh, I get what you're saying now. You're actually right. Like we could do this at the house. They just don't know how to make a good drink. Or like, oh, I just don't know how to make steak like you do. Or I just don't know how to do those things. So that's why I tend to be a little bit more willing to do it, because you realize that there are some people who are saying yes and want you to say yes to whatever it is, not just because you should be able to do it or because they think you're being mean, but because they aren't empowered themselves.
That's it.
And how to create experiences. And they feel like if I'm being flippant or in many cases unwilling or lazy about getting creative, you should be willing to be just as lazy as I am. Like we've done this before. And so it's like, well, I'm just in a different space right now, because sometimes it's actually not about money at all. Sometimes it's just about the time and what that time is going to cost you. Sometimes it's just about your body or your health and what that experience is going to cost you. And you realize a lot of people just don't have those issues. They haven't had to deal with those things. And so they aren't as accommodating. So it's not always a no because you just don't want to do it and because you just feel like being mean. It's because the other person just doesn't even know. Like they are truly clueless to what your criteria or what it may be costing you, not just even just financially, but emotionally, physically, etc.
That's a good point, because there are people who can only get an emotional payoff from one type of experience. They haven't gotten creative to figure out, like, how can I get the same feeling through something else? You can still feel rich without having to be in a 4-star, 5-star restaurant. You can still feel joy without spending a bunch of money with your children. Yeah. Kids don't need much. They just need permission to run wild and someone to laugh with. You can do that anywhere. You don't have to be Disney. It don't have to be anything that requires a ticket. In fact, if you look up some of the local activities, you'll probably find a lot of free things that you've been ignoring because we thought that joy and childhood and magic could only come if there was a price tag attached to it. And that's not true. The same is true for dinner. To your point, like there's a lot of ways to have dinner with friends, make it fun, have a theme, whether it's taco night or childhood favorites or Trader Joe tapas or them Costco snacks. Like one of my favorite things in life right now is when Julian comes home with new Costco snacks. Like it feels luxurious because I've never had it. It is luxurious. $16 luxury.
It is. It's luxurious. I bring home the greatest snacks.
They have the greatest snacks.
And you're always exploring something. And even with my mom's birthday, I'm sure there are plenty of things that she would have wanted us to do.
Oh, she was so tickled.
But she was like, couldn't even contain it. She was like, oh my gosh, look at all these little things that I would have never bought on my own. Yeah. Or in some cases, I'm replenishing something that she really only gets on special occasions. It's like, yes, I've got 16 new, she loves anything that is even remotely tropical. But along those lines, what living on one income also allows you to do, and this is, I think, where pride comes in, is you just allow people to show up for you. Mm-hmm. Because there are some friends, right? We just talked about the friends who never had to really deal with much. And so they're just expecting you to keep this thing going. But there are also the other friends who are willing to do it, and they maybe saw something, they know something, and it could just be little stuff. Like you just wanted to go for a walk, and it's like, hey man, this one's on me. This little matcha.
I got it.
This little.
Not the matcha.
Yeah, just a little matcha.
I started to buy some
matcha. Oh yeah, I got you. That's on me. Or lunch, or this round, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Or like, I just want you to come. So like, I'm gonna get the room with the double bed. You just got to find a way to get there.
Stay with me. You can ride with me.
Don't worry about it. Exactly. It's the little things like that I think really shows up in these moments. In some cases, it's also, with respect to kids, realizing that you don't have to buy something new. You just had a kid or something changed with your kid and someone says, here, take this thing. Like that's one of the best feelings in the world when a friend shows up with a toy or, a car seat or whatever it is. A jacket. Cause it's like, yeah, he's growing. You know what? Take this because like at this rate, he's going to need it, by the summer and my kid's not using it or not using it anymore or never used it.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases. And sometimes it's not even just for the kid. It could be for you. It's like, looks like you might need this better than me. And you just sitting on it. It's just taking up space. You don't want to give it away. You just sitting there waiting on it and you have an opportunity to give. In a lot of cases, people have an opportunity to give to you. But pride, right? Like letting your pride get in the way and not really being willing to accept things because you don't want to be seen as needy or
you were told like never take a handout. Like there's a lot of people with conditioning where it's like, nah, I can't let you do that. I can't let you do that. And
I got a friend right now. I got a friend right now and I'm calling him out primarily because I know he doesn't listen to our podcast.
None of your friends listen to our podcast.
That's not true. That's not true. And this actually is no laughing matter, but he is he's battling a tumor. And he's very vocal about it, giving everybody the play-by-play, but he's also like not wanting people to talk about it.
Right.
Shower him with love. And it feels weird because it's putting me in an awkward position because I want to reach out. But when somebody literally said, that ain't the only thing y'all can reach out to me for, it's like, well, I know, fair. But you just put that out there. And that's kind of all I'm really thinking about whenever it comes to you right now. And so it's weird. But again, he's got his own cross to bear and his own battles. We all do. But that pride, man, that pride can get in the way. That ego can get in the way a lot of times. And, I'm not picking on them. I'm just using them as an example because I know there are plenty of people. We all have our struggles when it comes to pride, but just don't be afraid, because this is an opportunity. And again, I'm saying it from someone who has battled and won many, many battles, that I take great pride in saying that both emotionally, career-wise, entrepreneurially, in our marriage, as a father. I've got a lot more reps than a lot of people. And I'm not saying that because I'm older. I'm saying it because of the way that we've decided to live our lives. And our lives are not just dedicated to work, which has opened up capacity to do so many other things. And what comes from that is a wealth of experience. And you start to see a lot of things that adults are struggling with these days. And it's kind of sad to see. And so we're offering up the best advice that we can. But yeah, pride is expensive, man.
Yeah,
sometimes you don't want to be the person that's like, it's just unwilling to accept a handout. That's arguably like a trope that we give or label older generations with. And here we are like carrying this on as millennials and in some cases Gen Xers as well. But like, it's just a human thing. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I think just gets in the way of a lot of people being a bit more able to comfortably get through some of the battles that they're dealing with.
Because sometimes all you need is someone else to be part of the solution. You've reached the limit on things that you can imagine, think about, and actually do. And what you need is whatever that person is offering. You don't know that initially, which is where the resistance comes from.
Yeah.
It's the immediate reaction to like, y'all can talk to me about something else. And it's like, well, yeah, we're going to get there. But I want to acknowledge what you're going through first, and then we can move on from whatever. And, I don't know that situation personally, but the point is like, just don't isolate yourself. Don't take going down to one income as a rationale for no longer being social or no longer being willing to let your people love on you.
Yeah.
Because that's not a sustainable game.
Yeah. I've seen some people do this really, really well. It's like, hey, I'm not afraid, right? They kind of make a joke out of it and say, look, I'm not afraid, man. We need this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
Right? Like just cut straight to it.
Yeah.
It's like, look, I can deal with it on my own, but man, I could deal with it a lot quicker and faster. Here's what I need. Like just giving. I've said this in regards to something else because I don't really think people notice that they just don't do it at all. Like I certainly don't see it often, but like just be honest about what you need up front, cut through it and say, look, I'm dealing with this. Here's what I need. Like all the well-wishing and the thoughts and the prayers is great. People are great asking for thoughts and prayers, but literal things or money or donations, people get like really, really.
Or just for you to pay for the dinner. I want to go,
exactly,
but I can't pay for my portion. You got me?
Like what I've found is in most cases, people are like, man, I appreciate you being honest about that. And then it gives them license to be honest about their own things. And then we all kind of agree like, all right, you know what? To your point, I really want you to come. So here's what I think we're going to do to make sure that happens. And I think that to me is one of the most beautiful experiences ever.
Yeah. All right. This last tip is about selling your stuff, because everyone loves to suggest just sell your stuff. Like that doesn't come with some emotional price tag.
Oh, for sure.
There is a point where you will need to sell something if you need money. And at the end of the day, we attach meaning to our stuff. That's the whole point of consumer culture. So yes, selling the stroller or the designer bag isn't just getting cash in the bank account. It's also letting go of a version of yourself. And I struggled with this. I mean, it was up until last summer where I had heels that I can't walk in still in my closet because I knew what that meant to get rid of them. I knew that would eliminate a version of myself that I no longer was, but I was still very attached to her. And so when we talk about selling your stuff to create more income or just to declutter the house or just to move on and let go, there's a lot of negotiation there as well, especially if you and your partner disagree on what something's worth or who it belonged to or whether we actually need to let it go. Like, are things that bad? And they may not be, but it's just a matter of actually communicating what you're doing this for.
Yeah, I think selling stuff does two things for a lot of people, which is why they're so resistant. One, it highlights the complete lack of confidence that people have in their salesmanship. And it's just an uncomfortable thing. It's almost like public speaking.
Well, it's like asking people for money.
Yeah.
Except it's not.
It
feels that way.
It feels that way, right? And so there's that part. Like it unlocks an entire level of things that just make people really, really uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But the second thing is it is in many ways a gross admission of failure or like a bad decision. Right? Like
it can feel that way.
I have something.
Even when it's not.
Exactly. I have some, and you can always kind of tell sometimes where it's like, I'm going to sell this thing and I'm letting it go for this much. And it's like, so that I can recoup what I was like, okay, look, you either want somebody to buy it or you don't, but this little $5 or $10 off ain't going to do it. You know what I mean? Like you want it to move or not. You want this thing to happen quickly or you want to hold on to it. I think that tactic is probably better suited for people who are much more comfortable or at least have a much clearer idea over what it is that's they're selling. But I know for a fact that people are underutilizing the platforms that are hubs for being able to sell things. There's some people who just get it, and there are other people who are just really, really unwilling to do it for a variety of reasons. But like there's tons of stuff, whether it's old technology, you talked about clothes and shoes. It could be old kid stuff. In a lot of cases, it could be books that are just sitting there on your bookshelf and you're never going to read them again.
Special occasion clothes. If you got bridesmaid dresses, suits, ties, things that your life no longer requires, even if it's formal wear, sequins, whatever you're not wearing no more, all that stuff can be sold. And the first tip that I have is to start with the easy yes stuff. These are things that you're not going to use, you won't miss, or you don't even remember buying. That's the stuff that you gather up.
Or it's a gift. That's just a gift that was given to you. And, I know I used to do that. I was like, you got to hold on to it at least one good time for that person to come so that it makes it look like I liked it or I appreciated it. Meanwhile, it's just taking up room.
It is.
In your house or in your garage or in your drawers or in your closet or in the trunk of your car. It's like, just go ahead and sell it.
Yeah.
Even if you'd sell it for 50% of what it's worth in the marketplace.
You're not using it no way.
You're not going to miss it.
And you don't remember buying it or getting it.
Exactly.
And this is an easy way to bypass that emotional pull from the stuff that you actually value or valued at one point. It gives you quick wins, it gives you fast cash, and it builds momentum for you to actually start tackling the other things that you need to sell or want to sell.
Yeah. When we made the financial technology toolkit, there's an entire episode that we did a podcast about it. There was a company which escapes me. I remember meeting someone who worked for them a couple of years ago, but they're great at selling old tech. And so if you got an old, laptop or an old phone or an old iPad or desktop computer, whatever it is, you can just send it to them and they will, first of all, you can just find that particular item and they will give you a quote and you just send it to them. And it's easy way to make cash. I think that's also a great way for a lot of older people, who might be holding on to something and they're ready to, it's like, it's either you're going to spend some time trying to find a coupon to replace a new thing, or you can just sell the old thing that you have and treat that as a contribution towards the new version of whatever it is. But there are companies who basically treat it like a tech junkyard, sell it to them and they will take care of all the shipping and all that stuff and just cut you a check right then and there, direct deposit into your account. But old tech, that old tech drawer, whatever it is, I'm telling you, there's value. There's like a little gold mine right then and there. And it's a great way to, either go towards a new purchase or just accomplish two things. Decluttering your home. I think it is called declutter. Come to think of it. DECLUTTR. This is not pub, but I think that's what it's called. Check out declutter.com. But that's what it's for. And it just accomplishes multitude of things all at once. And I think, whenever you are down on one income, that's kind of what you need, because you got more than enough decisions to make as well. You need to find a way to kill as many birds with one stone as possible.
Yeah, I do the same thing with clothes with the Real, that you can send them clothes. And when that item sells, you can either get a store credit or cash. And if you get a store credit, then you can just use it for the next purchase. And it just allows you to continue to consign your wardrobe within this little ecosystem. And you have your clothing budget that is self-sustaining, and you're not adding to the pile of things that needs to be created because everybody insists on buying new.
Yeah.
The other piece of advice I'd give around selling things is to try and sell in categories, not necessarily items. So as someone who's sold a lot of things online, selling things one by one can be really draining, both emotionally and logistically. But categories feels more like a system. So you might decide that 1 week you're going to focus on kitchen gadgets. And then the next week you're going to focus on the closets in the house. And then maybe the week after that, you'll focus on toys and sporting goods. And what this allows you to do is when you're putting 7 or 8 listings on whatever site it is, whether it's Poshmark or Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, when you're selling your toaster, that person can look at your other items and say, oh, okay, well, you got a grill for sale, you got a NutriBullet, you got a smoothie shaker, and you might be able to get more than one item for each customer.
You got to look up a fondue machine.
Yeah,
we got a fondue machine that we won in a Secret Santa that's just sitting in
I think
garage.
It's a crock pot. I don't know if it might be a fondue machine.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, we got a
different name. It's
a dirty Santa trade.
That's what it's called. Nobody using that thing.
And if you're going to sell in categories, make sure that you give yourself a rule. Like if something doesn't sell in 2 weeks, then it either goes to donation or buy nothing. Like this doesn't need to consume you. If it doesn't sell and it's not something that you are entirely in need of the money, then just go ahead and get rid of it so that the next time you need income, that's not cluttering up your mind or your space and you think that there's still like a customer out there for that, you can still just move on, right?
Yeah.
And what it does is just keeps you in task mode instead of memory mode. And it helps you avoid the trap of debating every object's life story. Like at some point, you have to clear up your thinking so that you can solve the issue that you actually have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the big idea here, and, this is, I guess, my final thought, and it goes back to the first point that we were making here. Like, while budgeting is important to help identify areas or categories, as you put it, where you might want to go ahead and make some cuts or opportunities to sell some things that you just aren't using or you don't value that might be taking up space. This is not just about like a financial skill. It's also about relationship skills, that relationship with your partner, the relationship with yourself, and the willingness to make peace with the past and say, you know what, I'm a size this now. So I'm going to go ahead and say, wow, this is important. I'm going to go ahead and part ways with this thing, have a little ceremony and sell it, get that cash and just, move on. That's a really, really important part of this process. And however long you're going through this one income period, whether you're doing it willingly or you're doing it out of necessity, that right there, that dealing with, that coping with the experience of making those kinds of big, difficult, complex decisions is what this experience is about.
Yes.
And if you just focus on one part of it, it's almost like you're just playing defense. You're not thinking about offense. Or if you just focus on it the other way, you're not looking at this holistically. It's about building that muscle or going back into the set of sort of exercise that you used to do in the past. We find ourselves in that situation recently, and it's like, man, I'm glad we know what to do now. Because the first time we were doing it, we didn't really know what we were doing. You thought you doubled down on some things, and those tricks don't work anymore.
That's
but
it.
Now we're just better equipped.
Yeah.
And when you go through that experience, I even think back to 2020. I remember, a couple of years lifting my head and realizing, like, wow, all things considered, man, like we were able to kind of cruise through that experience because we'd already done the work, and I think that's what this is about. Whatever this period is, this layoffs and pending recession, whether it happens or not, it's not going to be the last time.
No.
And so you either want to give yourself an opportunity to create a set of routines and skills or a skeletal budget or have some of those conversations now, or you want to continue to fake the funk. It's going to be that much harder the next time this happens, however many years from now, where you're dealing with it. And it's like, yeah, now you're talking about 20, 30 years where you've been ignoring this thing or not building a set of skills and approaches to deal with the turmoil. And it's going to be really, really difficult. So that's what this is really about. I'll give one other recommendation. We've talked enough about our book, but there's a book that I believe Senator Elizabeth Warren co-authored called The Two Income Trap, which basically highlights exactly this. Like they talk about the trap of having two incomes and the illusion that it creates. I think a lot of people struggle with that. They think like, oh my gosh, I make good money, she makes good money, or whatever your household looks like, we good and it's always going to be like this. And it's like, actually, no. Like it's like that for a certain period of time. And so what you do during that time is really, really important, whether it's paying down debt or it's investing at a high rate or it's building some foundation. But whatever it is, it's likely not going to be like that smoothly for 30, 40 years. Like you're going to deal with some hiccups. And that's what a lot of people are dealing with right now. And I think they're struggling with the embarrassment of that. They're struggling with the pride. They're struggling with just the economic realities of that situation. And hopefully this episode inspires them to push through, to recognize that you're not alone, right? You just happen to be in a really, really tough spot right now, but there is something that you can do about it. And I guarantee you, when you climb out of this, you're going to come out of it with thicker skin and a stronger sense of resilience. And my hope is that even when you replace that income, you are able to reflect back on this experience and make better decisions during the good times so that when it happens again, you're not finding yourself tripping over the same wire.
Yeah. There's a reason hindsight is 2020 is such a popular phrase, because even as you're reflecting back on the year 2020 and how we quote unquote cruise through it, it's like we can say that 5 years removed, but there were times when we were in it that it was choppy as hell. Like it's not easy, but it is worth it. And I hope that people remember that like there's a reason why hindsight is 2020, because if you can show up on the other side and look back, it doesn't feel as bad. No different from like bumping your knee or anything that you give time and space to be apart from.
Look.
And it's remembering that living on one income is a team sport as well. It's not just living on two incomes that makes y'all a team. The team is the team. And sometimes your teammate is just as stressed as you are. They may not say it the same way. They may not show it at all. But when you are carrying the weight of uncertainty, fear, embarrassment, and just feeling like you can't provide or you can't do the things that you used to do, you feel like you've walked backwards, it's easy to start seeing each other as the problem instead of as your partner in solving whatever this is. And that's where the real work begins. Like you said, this is not just about managing money. It's about managing how you show up for each other in the process. This is what they mean by for better or worse. This is what they mean by for richer and poorer. Those ors and ands and the bows, that's the fine print.
Mm-hmm.
You have to assume good intent. You have to pause before you snap. You're not going to get every decision right, but it's about staying on the same team, even when it feels like you're losing. Like you losing together. You just both be some losers.
Look, I'll give you the goal. This is the dead last thing I'll say here is I'll give you the goal, because what I know is that a lot of two income households still struggle to save 10% of their income, right?
Right.
They still struggle with that. They get down to one income and it forces them to make difficult decisions. Everything that we're saying and that we've been saying in this episode is about using this as an opportunity so that when you come out of it, you're better off. The goal should then be is to go from 10 to 25. And that seems like a big leap, but you have to remind yourself that what you were able to do on one, right? So go from prior to these tough times where you're struggling just to save 10%, or you feel like saving 10% is extreme, but you're patting yourself on the back because you're doing it, to now being forced to deal with just one, to now when you bounce back, being able to say, you know what, let's hold on because now we're wiser. We've learned, we have better experience working together. Let's see if we can make 25 the new 10. And if you do that consistently, I guarantee you the next time this comes, going back to the sentiment that I was trying to communicate about 2020 and any other previous time that we've been through, you'll be so surprised by how you're able to withstand that turbulent times. And I think that is just the ultimate goal here, like making yourself a little wiser, making yourself a bit more resilient.
Yes. All right, y'all. That's 3 tips. Hope we caught them. If not, then I don't know what to tell you. Play it again.
Yeah, play it again. Run it back.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rich and Regular podcast. If you like what you heard, please let us know by leaving a 5-star review or drop a comment below to keep the conversation going. If you're a couple that is living off of one income, either by choice or by force, we'd love to hear from you. And we will see y'all next week. If you like videos like this and want to see more, make sure you click subscribe and turn on notifications.